My father's office in downtown Chicago felt like a second home. The city's gray skies and biting wind were a constant backdrop to my life. But inside, surrounded by blueprints and the scent of freshly brewed coffee, I felt a kind of warmth. He often called me his pride, his darling, a phrase that, for a long time, was the soundtrack to my ambition. My name is Elena, and my father, Arthur Sterling, built a successful construction firm from the ground up. He wasn't just a boss. He was a mentor, a guide who taught me everything from calculating bids to the importance of a handshake. He was so proud of me, of us. The firm was supposed to be a partnership, our legacy. But a slow, venomous seed of resentment had taken root in me. For years, he had been promising to hand over the reins, yet every major decision still had to go through him. He treated me like an apprentice, not a partner. I saw it as a lack of trust, a deep-seated fear that I wasn't good enough to carry the Sterling name. The words, "I'm getting old," and "you'll have your turn," became a cruel lullaby. I spent countless nights poring over the company's finances, seeing how much I'd contributed to its growth and how little autonomy I truly had. The feeling of being undervalued festered, turning my love for him into a cold, calculated anger. I started a secret project, a way to prove my worth without his approval. My plan was to secure a major city contract, one he had been trying to get for years, behind his back. I used our best contacts, our most promising designs, all the knowledge he had so meticulously passed down to me. The betrayal felt like a logical step, a necessary evil to finally earn the respect I deserved. I convinced myself that this was the only way he would ever see me as his equal. The first step was to discreetly open a new business account under a different name, a phantom company that would serve as my Trojan horse. I told myself I was doing this for us, for the company's future. But deep down, I knew it was for me, and me alone. The thrill of the deception was a dark, intoxicating high. I felt powerful, in control, finally breaking free from his shadow. I used my lunch breaks and late nights to work on the proposal. My father, oblivious, would often find me in the office long after everyone else had gone home, and his face would light up. "Working hard, my darling?" he'd ask, his voice filled with pride. "Just catching up," I'd lie, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. I had to be careful. I created a fake project to explain the long hours, a small residential development I was overseeing. He trusted me completely, and that trust was the sharpest knife in my hand. The initial approach to the city's contracts office was nerve-wracking. I used an old contact, Michael, a man who had known me since I was a child. He was confused, asking why my father wasn't involved. I spun a story about a new subsidiary focused on smaller, more specialized projects. Michael, seeing the ambition in my eyes, agreed to hear me out. The city's project was a complete overhaul of a historic waterfront park, a project that promised immense prestige and profit. It was the perfect opportunity to prove my capabilities. I started meeting with suppliers and subcontractors, negotiating prices and timelines, all under the guise of my phantom company, Sterling & Comber Innovations. The name was a little too on the nose, but it was just enough to create a plausible link while keeping me separate from my father's firm. Every successful negotiation, every positive email from a city official, was a validation of my plan. It felt like I was playing a high-stakes game of chess against my own father. I was using his own pieces to checkmate him. The guilt would sometimes creep in, a cold finger tracing my spine, but I'd quickly push it away. This was about justice, about proving my worth. He had his chance. Now it was my turn. The final bid was due in a month, and I was getting closer to the finish line. The stress was immense, but so was the adrenaline. I was so focused on the victory that I couldn't see the wreckage I was leaving behind. The day I submitted the bid was a mix of triumph and terror. I walked into the City Hall building, a heavy folder clutched in my hand, feeling like a spy in my own city. I could almost hear my father's voice in my head, a mix of encouragement and a warning. Don't rush, Elena. Patience is a virtue. But I had no patience left. My proposal was detailed, innovative, and priced competitively. I had leveraged every bit of knowledge I had gained from working with him for years, and it showed. A week later, I received an email. Your proposal for the Lakeside Park restoration project has been selected for final consideration. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had done it. I had pulled it off. The news came just a day after my father had a meeting with the city to discuss their new projects. He came home frustrated, mentioning how the competition was fierce, and they were still considering proposals from a number of firms, including some new ones. He had no idea he was talking about me. The tension at home was thick. He started noticing my late nights more. You're burning the candle at both ends, honey, he'd say, a flicker of concern in his eyes. I brushed him off, pretending the small project was more demanding than expected. But the lies were starting to weigh on me. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I overheard one of the project managers, a man named Frank, who had worked for my father for 20 years, talking on the phone. I don't know, man. Something's off, he said. The boss is getting twitchy about the city contract, and Elena's been acting strange. She's always in here alone. My stomach dropped. The cracks were starting to show. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let my father get wind of this before the deal was officially closed. I was so close to victory, to the respect I had craved for so long. But the taste of victory was already turning bitter. The lie was getting bigger, and I was starting to lose control of the city's final decision arrived in an official-looking envelope, addressed to Sterling and Kerber Innovations. I opened it with shaking hands, a rush of cold air filling my lungs as I read the words. We are pleased to inform you that your firm has been awarded the contract for the Lakeside Park restoration project. The contract amount was staggering, the prestige immeasurable. I felt a surge of pride, a rush of pure, unadulterated triumph. I had done it. I had proven them all wrong. I drove to the office, the envelope on the passenger seat like a trophy. My plan was to lay it on his desk, watch his face as he realized what I had accomplished. I imagined his stunned silence, then a look of pride and admiration. But when I arrived, the office was quiet, and my father's door was ajar. I walked in and saw him holding a stack of my files, my notes, the fake company registration, everything. My blood ran cold. Elena, he said, his voice a low, pained whisper. The look on his face wasn't one of anger, but of profound disappointment, a deep, soul-crushing sadness. It was worse than any anger he could have shown. Why, darling? He asked, the words, my darling, now sounding like a cruel joke. He looked at me, a man I had admired my whole life, a man who'd given me everything, and I saw the betrayal mirrored in his eyes. He had been so proud, so trusting. In that moment, the years of resentment and the craving for recognition evaporated, replaced by a wave of shame so powerful it nearly brought me to my knees. The contract, the victory, the prestige, it all meant nothing. I had won the battle, but I had lost the war, and the person I had lost it to was myself. The pride he once had for me was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I had stolen his legacy to prove myself, and in doing so, I had destroyed the very thing I cherished most, his love and respect. The silence in the room was deafening, the truth of my actions echoing in the space between us. It was a silence that would haunt me for years to come. Please consider subscribing to the channel to not miss the continuation of this story. The days that followed were a blur of silence and sorrow. My father didn't shout or scream. He simply withdrew. He handed me the keys to the office, a gesture of defeat more devastating than any fight could have been. It's yours now, Elena, he said, his voice flat. "It's all yours." He packed a small suitcase, left a note on the kitchen counter, and was gone. Just like that. The man who had been my constant, my foundation, had vanished. The city contract I had fought so hard for now felt like a curse. I was the boss, but I was also alone. The other employees, who had been like family, looked at me with a mix of pity and suspicion. They had known my father for decades, and they saw a thief, not a leader. Frank, the project manager, handed in his resignation the next day. "I can't work for someone who would do that to their own father," he said, his eyes hard. His words echoed the sentiment of many others. The company, my prize, was now a shell of its former self. I tried to manage the city contract, but without my father's steady hand and the trust of his old team, I struggled. The subcontractors were hesitant, the suppliers were wary, and the logistical challenges felt insurmountable. I had the knowledge, but I lacked the wisdom and the human touch that made my father so successful. The cold truth dawned on me. He hadn't held me back out of a lack of trust, but out of a desire to teach me patience, to prepare me for the weight of the responsibility. I had been so blind, so consumed by my own ego, that I couldn't see his guidance for what it was. The victory was a hollow one. The money, the prestige, the title. None of it could fill the empty space my father had left behind. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The silence was overwhelming, punctuated only by the ringing of the phone, a call I never had the courage to answer. The project began to unravel. Without Frank and the core team's experience, mistakes were made. The budget started to balloon, and the timeline was constantly in jeopardy. I tried to bring in new people, but the company's reputation had been tarnished. I was known as the woman who had stolen her father's business, a title that no amount of success could erase. Every morning, I would walk into the empty office, the silence a constant reminder of my betrayal. I'd sit at the head of the long conference table, staring at my father's empty chair, imagining what he would have done. He would have known how to handle the supplier dispute, how to placate the city officials. He would have had the respect of his team. I had none of that. I was a queen on a lonely throne, and my kingdom was crumbling. I would spend my nights drinking, trying to drown out the guilt. I'd pick up my phone, my thumb hovering over his number, but I never called. What would I say? "I'm sorry?" The words felt too small, too insignificant to bridge the chasm I had created. One evening, a news report caught my eye. It was about a construction project my father had worked on years ago, a community center for underprivileged kids. The reporter was interviewing people from the neighborhood, talking about the positive impact the center had made. A woman spoke, her voice filled with gratitude. "Arthur Sterling didn't just build a building. He built a future for our children." The words hit me like a physical blow. My father wasn't just a businessman. He was a builder of communities. I had spent so long focused on the money and the power that I had forgotten the purpose of it all. I was building nothing but ruins. The pride he had shown me was not for my ambition, but for the person he thought I was. The person I had failed to be. The city's pressure was mounting. A new official, a stern woman named Ms. Davis, was assigned to the project. She was no nonsense and didn't care about my family drama. She only cared about the results. "Ms. Sterling," she said in a meeting, her voice as sharp as a razor, "this project is a mess. I need a clear plan to get it back on track, or we will be forced to terminate the contract." Her words were a wake-up call. I was on the verge of losing everything I had so ruthlessly fought for. I tried to rally the remaining team, but their morale was low, and their trust in me was non-existent. They did the bare minimum, and I couldn't blame them. I had betrayed their loyalty too. The company's reputation was in tatters. Old clients were leaving, and no new ones were coming in. I was drowning, and there was no one left to throw me a life vest. One rainy afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I saw a familiar face at a cafe across the street. It was Michael, the man who had helped me with the initial bid. I walked over, my heart in my throat. He looked at me with a sad, knowing expression. "Elena," he said, "I heard what happened. It's a shame." He didn't say anything else, but his eyes said it all. He had seen my ambition, and he had seen where it had led me. He had a family, a daughter my age, and he probably saw the same thing my father did in me. A promising future. But my promise had turned into a poison. The shame of my actions now felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. I had not only betrayed my father, but I had also betrayed the community, my employees, and the memory of who I was supposed to be. The throne I had so desperately craved was nothing but a cold, hard seat of regret. I sat there, a silent acknowledgement of my failure, the rain outside mirroring the tears I held back. I had to face the truth. I was a fraud, and I had ruined everything. Please consider subscribing to the channel to not miss the continuation of this story. Desperate, I finally broke down and called my father. The phone rang 3 times before going to voicemail. I called again. No answer. I tried every day for a week. Finally, I left a message, my voice cracking with every word. "Dad, it's me. I'm so sorry. I messed up. I'm losing everything. Please, I need your help. I miss you." I hung up, my hand shaking, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not out of anger or frustration, but out of pure, unadulterated pain. The next morning, I drove to the old family house. The curtains were drawn, and the grass was overgrown. I sat in my car for hours, just looking at it, remembering the days of barbecues and family gatherings, of him teaching me how to ride a bike in the driveway. The house was a ghost of a life I had so carelessly thrown away. I decided to try a different approach. I went to the community center he had built years ago. I found a woman who worked there, an old friend of his. I told her the whole story, every ugly detail. She listened patiently, her expression a mix of sympathy and sadness. "Your father. He loved you more than anything, Elena," she said softly. "He was so proud of you. He used to tell everyone that you were going to be the one to carry on his legacy. He wanted to give it to you, but he wanted you to be ready." Her words were a fresh wave of agony. I had been so close to getting what I wanted, but my impatience had cost me everything. I asked her if she knew where he was. She shook her head. He said he needed to get away, to clear his head. He didn't want to be found. The truth was a crushing blow. He hadn't just left, he had disappeared because of me. I went back to the office, a new sense of purpose in my heart. The project was still failing, but I was no longer fighting for the company or the money. I was fighting for a chance at redemption. I called Ms. Davis and laid out a new plan, one that was realistic and honest about the challenges. I told her I couldn't do it alone, and that I needed a team I could trust. I started reaching out to the old employees, not to beg them to come back, but to apologize. I called Frank, the project manager, and told him the truth, that I was arrogant and selfish, and that I had let my ego get the better of me. He listened, his silence a sign of his lingering hurt. "I don't know, Elena," he said. "The trust is gone." But he didn't hang up. A small victory. I spent the next few weeks working harder than I ever had, not for profit, but for progress. I was on the job site every day, learning from the ground up, getting my hands dirty. I started talking to the workers, hearing their concerns, and listening to their advice. I was no longer the boss. I was a partner, a collaborator. Slowly, things started to turn around. The project began to stabilize. The city noticed, and Ms. Davis even offered a rare smile. One afternoon, I was at the park, watching the construction, when I saw a car pull up. It was my father. He got out and walked toward me. He looked older, his face etched with worry, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Not forgiveness, but perhaps a glimmer of hope. "I heard you were having some trouble," he said, his voice quiet. He looked at the project, then back at me. "I also heard you're doing things the right way now." He stayed. He didn't come back as the boss, but as a consultant, a quiet guide. He would walk the site with me, offering advice, not as an order, but as an observation. "You know, the concrete mixture for that wall isn't quite right," he'd say. "Needs more fine aggregate." I would listen, and I would learn. The other employees, seeing him back, slowly started to return. Frank came back a week later, offering a small, understanding nod. The company was no longer mine. It was ours again. The work was hard, but it was honest. I learned more in those few months than I had in a lifetime. I learned that true leadership isn't about control. It's about trust, patience, and humility. The project was a success, a testament to what a team could accomplish when they worked together. On the final day, as the community gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood beside my father. A reporter asked him how he felt about the park. He looked at me, a proud smile on his face. "It was all Elena," he said. "She did this. She took a difficult situation and made it a success." My eyes filled with tears. He had given me a second chance, not just at the company, but at his love. The company was thriving again, not because of the money or the prestige, but because it was built on a foundation of honesty and trust. My father and I were rebuilding our relationship, one brick at a time. The pain of my betrayal would always be a part of me, a scar that served as a constant reminder of the consequences of my ambition. But I had also learned that a legacy wasn't just about a name on a building. It was about the people you helped, the bridges you built, and the love you cherished. I had lost my way, but with my father's help, I had found my way back. Please consider subscribing to the channel to not miss the continuation of this story.